Cloud.
There we are.
Hi, welcome everybody. We're here for Doc Talk. Dr. Erin Knopf is traveling today, so I will be your host with my incredible co-host who's been on Doc Talk once before or twice. Have you been on once or twice?
This is my twice.
This is her second time. So we are so lucky to have Stephanie Wilson here. Stephanie, will you go ahead and introduce yourself, some of your background and your expertise?
Yes, I'm so excited to be here for the second time. I am a registered dietitian. I specialize in eating disorders. I've been in this field for 7 years, I think. And my specialty, really where my heart lies, is eating disorders in athletes and that kind of nitty gritty in between energy availability and moving our body in ways that bring us joy.
Perfect. We're so lucky to have you. And thank you for the passion that you bring to this space. And there just aren't enough people in the world that have this kind of knowledge and expertise. And I'm just so glad you exist.
Oh, thank you.
I mean it. I mean it. We need more boots on the ground, do we not?
All the time.
I know. Okay, so our topic today is going to be about periods, or another word for that is menstruation, and bone health. And these are questions that you and I kind of reviewed what we want to talk about, but I'm so excited to hear everything you have to say because as a therapist, I've kind of absorbed some information as I've worked with eating disorders, but I didn't receive the training that you did as an RD and as you've become much more specialized. So I'm going to learn a lot with this. I hope to, and I'm going to ask a lot of questions. So
Perfect.
let's just start with reasons why people might lose their periods. What do you come across in your work?
So many reasons, right? We can't just narrow it down to one, which is why it's really challenging and why when someone goes to the doctor, sometimes they leave there with no explanation of what is going on, right? But I think the number one reason we see is low energy availability, whether that is conscious or subconscious, just not eating enough. That's the number one reason why our body cannot produce those hormones. But we also might lose it from high stress or excessive exercise or PCOS or our birth control, or if we breastfeed, we might not have it. There's a ton of different reasons, right, that we could lose this. And it's numerous. So I think while we don't have a straightforward answer, we do have a number one, which is low energy availability.
Yeah, I was telling you, I lost my period once when I just traveled internationally. And, sometimes like a shock or a stress or a change to the body, or when I would
Yeah.
start playing basketball in high school and I had been kind of more sedentary, and then I would shock my body with exercise.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that would be like missing maybe one or two, but does it become more problematic and the longer that goes?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. So there's a ton of different like lengths of losing your period. You can lose it for 1 month, right? And it's like, okay, we've lost it.
Back
Get
on
get a
track.
li-
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
get back on track. We can lose it for 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, etc. Right? And as we kind of go longer, that's more and more of an impact that it has internally on our systems.
Okay, that's good to know. So talk to us about like the hypothalamus and other factors that are involved in period loss that's kind of important to have education around.
Yeah. So when we lose our period for low energy availability, it's called hypothalamic amenorrhea. And essentially, when we don't have that energy, it like affects our hypothalamus, which then reduces gonadotropin releasing hormone, which then reduces our FSH, which is follicle stimulating hormone, and our luteinizing hormone, right? Big words. Why do we care? Whatever, right? Well, this affects our estrogen, right? So this whole trickle down affects how much estrogen we get put into our body, right? Whatever those big words I just said, we all know estrogen and we all know that we need that piece, that big hormone to produce our period, right? So
Mhm.
we don't eat enough, it affects our hypothalamus. We have this trickle down, it reduces our estrogen, and we lose our period,
Got
right?
it. Mhm.
So the other piece of this too, which I said was stress, right? Cortisol can also inhibit gonadotropin releasing hormone. So the
Mm.
same way that low energy can, so can cortisol.
That would explain my international travel. It was amazing, but stressful.
Yep. Yep. There you go.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so I think when we see this trickle down effect and we lose that estrogen, our body then releases more hormones to basically try and get it back. So it releases leptin, which is like, hello, those fat cells release leptin, trying to be like, eat, go get something, like bring us back to where we need to be. And it's
Mhm.
just this whole cycle of hormones kind of going crazy, all because we're not eating enough.
Yeah, and it's so cool how wise our body systems are to try to keep us alive, right?
Yeah. Yes.
It's so cool, like how, yeah, that for those of you that don't know where the hypothalamus is, it's in the brain. Most people know that, but just in case you didn't, like your
Yeah.
brain is doing so much mysteriously cool stuff outside of your conscious awareness to try to keep you alive, right?
Yeah. It's wild. It's very smart. We have a very smart body.
We do have wise bodies. So tell us about like lab values and what they look like when you're working with a client who has amenorrhea.
Yeah. So when we're like adding back in food and we're trying to get that period back, we're going to look at that luteinizing hormones and that estradiol or that estrogen level to see kind of where we get it back. We also can look at a leptin level, right? Which we also want to see that kind of coming back because it's released from fat mass. If we don't have fat mass, we release less leptin, right?
Is leptin the hunger hormone and ghrelin the fullness hormone? Am I remembering that
Other
right?
way around. So
Other
so
way
I
around.
think of ghrelin as growling, right? Our
Oh,
stomach is
good. Okay.
growling, it's hungry.
Okay. Okay. Perfect.
So
Leptin is fullness, ghrelin is hunger. Got it.
yes. But what's annoying is leptin is so when it gets released, right? It gets released and ghrelin gets released as we're kind of going into that starvation. So it gets really confused. But then
Mhm.
as we go into more starvation, leptin levels go down along with that
Mm.
estradiol and that luteinizing hormone.
Okay.
So
So like
as
the
we're kind of,
satisfaction or fullness goes down. Yeah. Because
yeah,
it's like we need more, we need more, we need more. Got it.
yep. Yep,
Got it.
exactly. So as we're kind of coming back, those are some of those labs that we can just look at. They're not going to give us the whole story, right? We can't put all our eggs into one basket. We never can. But I think it is definitely some data that we can gather to see kind of where we are and if we're making the progress towards getting that period back. I think
Putting the
the
putting
other
pieces of the
part,
puzzle together. Yeah.
a lot of my clients as well, and from the research, is we know that they actually need to be heavier than they were when they lost their period to get it back.
I'm so glad you're saying that because that's what I'm familiar with what they call it overshoot theory. Is that kind
Yeah.
of, yes, that in
And
order for your body to feel safe again, right? It needs to feel like there's even some stores available.
yes. Yep. And so a lot of times, if we're kind of, if an individual is like, okay, well, I lost my period at this, so I got to get to that, and we still
Mhm.
don't see it back, that's so normal. And the data shows that we really actually need to go a little higher to kind of get close to that. The research also shows we need to be at 90% of that target weight or wherever we need to even possibly kind of get that back regularly. We could maybe get one period back, but to be regular, we have to be
Yes.
sitting at that target weight for like a long period of time.
Yes. Yes. Longevity, consistency.
Yep.
And I'll just say from research, I won't go into a ton of detail, but like body composition can change after what your body perceives as a famine, but over time, body composition tends to return to where it was prior to the famine, even though during like refeeding and weight restoration, the composition might look different. Is that a fair
Yes.
assessment? Yeah.
Yes. All the research shows that we are born with a pretty much like normal composition in our body. And when we restrict and when we binge, it's going to shift and change. But if we normalize our eating patterns, our body composition finds its happy place again.
Yeah. And the reason I brought that up is because if people have to overshoot their weight
Yeah.
restoration to get their period back, that's not saying that that will be the case that your body composition is wildly different forever. It's just about
Yep.
restoring your menstrual health and then keeping your body weight and composition consistent. Is that right?
Yes. Perfect.
Okay, good. Just because sometimes when people hear that, they're like,
Oh
yeah.
yeah, it can It can bring up a lot of
Of
feelings.
a lot of anxiety, but we're
Yeah.
on your side and we want you well. So
Yes.
let's just talk for a minute about why is it important to have a period? A lot of people think that's just about reproduction, but there's a lot more to it than that. Tell us.
Yeah. I mean, yes, reproduction, woohoo, but a lot of the people we work with are on the younger side, haven't even thought about creating a family. And that
Please
is just
don't.
like
Not when you're 15 and 16. Please don't.
exactly one tiny little piece that our period gives us, right? The other pieces of it is it's actually completely connected, one, to our bone health that we were going to talk about, right? If we don't have enough energy availability, we lose that period, in which case it disrupts. So we have two things in our bone called osteoclasts and osteoblasts.
Oh.
Blasts break down our bone, osteoclasts rebuild our bone. When we
Hmm.
don't have enough energy availability, it imbalances that breakdown in that building and it breaks down. It takes nutrients from our bone structure.
Mm.
So that's when we start to see osteoporosis and osteopenia in really young individuals who should have a really strong bone structure.
Yeah.
The other part is, which we don't really talk about a lot, but periods have a lot to do with mental health. They have a lot to do with our immunity. They have a lot to do with our just general well-being. And so we kind of see this, and it's so much more diverse than we think or talk about as we're
Mhm.
younger.
Agreed. I was just thinking how the thing that's so miraculous about our bodies are how many systems are operating outside of our conscious awareness to keep us awareness, excuse me, to keep us well. And your heart and your lungs, for example, your cardiovascular system, they operate outside of our conscious awareness, but when there's a hiccup in them, that's very, very threatening to our survival. The same is true with your reproductive system. There's a reason that periods are monthly. And of course, there are some effects of periods that aren't very pleasant, but it's a good sign of health in the system,
Yes.
not just for reproduction, but for continued growth and development of the human with the period. Is that fair to say?
Yes. And that just like little light bulb went off for me. So when we get our period, right? Like when we are hitting puberty, typically those ages are from like 8 to 13 is when people first get that period or start to kind of hit that adolescence. That's when we have this huge jump in our bone growth and our density of our bone, right?
Mhm.
So the majority of our bone health and growth happens up until around 18 or 19. But that doesn't mean it ends. We can accumulate bone until our mid 20s. So, when do eating disorders happen?
Yeah.
Adolescence and in our 20s, exactly when we should be accruing this bone density, exactly when we should be creating this super strong skeleton for the rest of our life.
Yeah.
So, it kind of, they kind of abut in there.
Yeah, you reminded me that I was taught, maybe you can verify if I got this information correct, that the two biggest growth spurts are going to be from 0 to 5. Think of how much you grow from 0 to 5, and then during puberty. And both of those are so important from a nutritional standpoint to make sure, like adolescents, people have notoriously tricky diets,
Yeah,
even outside of the eating disorder community. And it's like, if you think about ages 0 to 5, how important it is to have a variety of nutrients while your body is growing exponentially, and especially for bone health in terms of this conversation. It's just such an integral time. And then when disordered eating is happening during that growth, it's so compromising and dangerous for your long-term health. Skeletal health is so integral.
right. And I mean, with that, right, the nutrients piece, regardless of the eating disorder, whether that is just, oops, I'm missing lunch each day because I'm so into talking to my friends, right?
Right.
Whatever it is, we can see that actually on people's growth charts. So we can
Wow.
see their height getting impacted from
Mhm.
lack of nutrition. And
Yep.
so that's just like a huge, and it takes a while, right?
Mhm.
Bones don't respond quickly, right? When we break a
Yeah.
bone, it's not like it's heals like a scab. But so
Mhm.
we can actually see that and we can be like, oh, shoot, there's something going on here that we need to fix, whether that is disordered or not disordered. I see a lot of kiddos who just don't know how much to eat, but it's
Yeah.
impacting their bodies and their bone structure.
This is only peripheral related, but I think it would be important to mention. So I had a teen that got assessed for ADHD and was using a stimulant during his early teen years, and then his weight, because it affected his appetite, and he wasn't
Yep.
consciously trying to restrict food, but he was restricting food because his appetite was restricted from the med. His growth chart went, he had some weight
Yep.
loss. He stopped growing, which was like,
Yep.
so we got him off the meds. We replaced it
Yep.
with a different med that worked a lot better, got his bone health back on track, got his weight back on track. That stuff is so dangerous.
I see it all the time. I work with adolescents, I work with college kids, and they need to study, right? They have to get their work done. They have to be productive. And so I do a lot of work around how can we create structure and schedules and basically get food into them without them having to go out of their way to remember it and do it, right? But you're
Mhm.
so right. Those meds, which are so helpful, can
Mhm.
also be really detrimental if we don't recognize what's happening.
Yeah, like I try to remind people that the reason we can go for some time without food is because our bodies have adapted to, like, historically a real infrequent availability of food, and it was a way to survive. It doesn't mean you should utilize that. Like, just like we can't go very long without oxygen, we can't go very long without sleep, we can't go very long without water. We can go slightly longer without food because we adapted to do so. That doesn't mean it's a good idea to do so.
I was literally talking to one of my students about that today. I said, we as humans can choose to overeat and we
Yeah.
can choose to undereat.
Yes.
That doesn't mean that either one of them is a great idea.
Exactly. Exactly. Thank goodness we have more availability. The majority of folks do have availability.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's a different conversation. So, another question I have is, like, is amenorrhea, or the presence of a menstrual period, a perfect indicator of bone or reproductive health?
I wish that
Yeah,
would be great.
wouldn't it?
No. So there are individuals that can maintain their period while restricting, while at a low weight, while excessively exercising, which does not indicate the whole picture.
Yeah.
Vice versa, we can have someone who is barely restricting and lose their period, right?
Yes.
Everybody's body is so different how it responds, right? And so I think while I was saying at the beginning, there's so much that goes into it. I think as well with energy availability and periods, there's tiny little things we can look for, right? We can look for, did the period shorten? Did it get lighter? Are we using less tampons? Is it a darker color, right? Those are all, are we getting less cramps, more cramps? There's so many things that can indicate if it's a shorter or less intense period, which, while nice sometimes to bleed less, if that's your norm, that's what we want your norm
Not
to
a good
be.
sign. Yeah. I think in general, it's such a good marker that we're on the right track, but it's important to mention it's not always the case that that is a perfect marker. And just like with everything with the human body, it depends, it's complicated, it's unique and individual. But in general, the overwhelming majority of folks having a regular period that have uteruses, that's a good sign.
Yeah.
But that's not always the case. And that's why you can work with an expert like yourself. Correct?
Yes. Yes, indeed.
So a big pet peeve that I have, and I think we share this pet peeve, is when I have an amenorrheic client go to a medical doctor and that has disordered eating or an eating disorder. Yeah. And they prescribe birth control to my client. Can you
Yes.
explain why we hate that?
Oh, can I? Do you
Yeah,
have
please
like
do.
2 hours? Let me just
Yes.
get on my soapbox.
Take your time, please, please.
So the old research used to say that prescribing birth control would create this period, right? Which it does. It puts
Yes.
hormones into your body via a pill. It grows the lining in your uterus and sheds it, and you get a
Mhm.
period.
Yep.
So now, in today's world, with our data and our research, that is not considered a spontaneous menstrual cycle. And what we are looking for with recovery of that menstrual cycle is a spontaneous menstrual cycle. So, what that means is that individual needs to be fueling optimally enough to get their estrogen back to get their luteinizing hormone back and to get their leptin levels up to spontaneously get their own menstrual cycle, not get it. I mean,
Artificially.
literally man-made. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly. It's
Yeah.
not spontaneous if we're taking birth control.
So yeah, I've had doctors say like, well, but they're at risk, and so we may as well artificially induce it to protect bone health. I've literally had doctors say that to me. What would you respond to that?
So there is data that shows that if someone has gone with their period for an extended period of time and their bone health is at risk, they should have an estrogen, like a patch, or they should have an estrogen injection. And that is really beneficial, not in the form of birth control.
Yes.
So it
Yes.
needs to be given by a doctor specializing in that. And it is there's many reasons why we don't do an estrogen patch and why we don't want to recommend those things until they are absolutely necessary. So
Exactly.
giving birth control to just have someone have a period or to protect their bone health, number one, eat food,
Yes.
not just
Vitamin F.
giving.
Vitamin F. Food. Food, food, food.
Yes.
Yes. Otherwise, it's like a Band-Aid on a broken bone. That's
Yep.
not, yeah, we are speaking about bones, but in the metaphor, I mean, that is not going to heal the problem, which is
No.
we need the hypothalamus on board to create the chain effect of reproductive health and safety, not reproductive, menstrual and bone health and safety. One
Yes.
of the effects, which would be reproductive health. Okay.
Yes.
What do you feel like are the most common misconceptions that people have about menstruation and or bone health?
Um, Menstruation for the younger children and the college age individuals is that it just gives you the ability to have a baby, which is, as we've said
True.
again and again, one tiny little piece of why that is important. And so educating on why this is so complex and so cool is one of the things I love. I mean, I just like light up when I get to talk about periods with my kids. It's just, and they're like, ugh. And I'm like, no, it's so cool.
It's natural, normal. It's important to
Yes.
normalize conversations about. Yeah.
Yes. And as far as bones go, I think when we're young, we don't think about our skeleton. We don't think about all the things we want to do as we go through our life. And so, really bringing that focus back to like, hey, yes, we're in the now, but we also want to think about what do we want to do when we're 30, 40, 50, 60. We want to be stable. We want to be strong. We want to be able to catch ourselves when we slip on ice, right?
Think
So,
about
really,
old lady you and how you want her to be freaking strong, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, a
Yeah.
strong, I was just badass old
Yes.
lady.
So yeah, if people are curious about their skeletons, what can they do to find out about it? And then also, in addition to that, if there is a problematic amount, or if they have a problematic skeleton or bone health, is that something you can restore?
Yes. So if you have lost your period for an extended period of time, if we've had fractures or we've had bone stress injuries and we're like, what the heck, what's going on? You can get a DEXA scan. So that is a scan of your whole body. Depending on your age, they'll kind of scan different parts, but it's going to tell you your bone density, usually on your hips, your back, your spine, your femoral shaft. Those are all those big bones where we really should see some really awesome bone density. And that DEXA is going to compare it to individuals your own age and against the average 30-year-old. Basically, where are we going? Where's our, like,
Mm.
how do we compare, right?
Mhm.
If those scores indicate osteopenia or osteoporosis, right, lower bone density than we should have at our age, we can restore our bone health up until our late 20s. We can accrue bone, basically.
Mm.
So, what we can do is make sure we're getting 4 servings of calcium containing foods a day. Or if we're like, oh no, that's really not my thing, I don't love dairy products. Okay, cool, take a supplement, that's fine.
Yeah.
Eat leafy greens and beans and like soy milk,
And take like a
whatever.
calcium pill maybe on top of it.
100%.
Okay.
Yep.
Mhm.
Just make sure if we're taking a calcium supplement, it also has vitamin D in it. They go hand in hand. They need to be together to be
Okay.
absorbed.
That's because you'll see some milk that has like vitamin D in it too. Is that just
Yes.
help with absorption? Okay.
Yes. My last thing is I did say, we can accrue bone health or bone density until our mid-20s. If we are older than that, we can maintain it. So
Okay.
that is our best course of action, is maintain, maintain, maintain as we get older.
Is that why so many older people, when they fall, they break bones, is just the loss of bone health over the the lifespan? Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
100%. So many elderly individuals have osteopenia, osteoporosis, which can be so scary and detrimental as you get older. So
Yeah.
if we are taking our calcium vitamin D pill, or really on top of taking in a lot of different calcium containing products, the hope is that our bones are super strong. So when we fall or have an accident, it's not that big of a deal for us.
We can recover faster and yeah, okay. So
Yeah.
dairy is like the most perfect container for everything you need, but if you can't eat dairy or just refuse to eat dairy,
Yeah.
you can have beans, leafy greens, and then a supplement with calcium and vitamin D.
Soy milk also has a lot of calcium in it.
Oh.
You can get orange juice that has a calcium like fortified into it. There's a ton of products out there that have it
Mhm.
fortified now because a lot of people don't like dairy, and that's totally okay.
I will never understand that because cheese is my favorite food in the world,
Me
but I
too.
understand that not everyone is me.
I frequently tell my husband that I am cheese. Um,
I'm like, how could I could never live without cheese. Now watch, I'll get like some sort of a dairy allergy or something in my old.
oh no, we don't talk
No,
about
no, no.
that. That'd
I
be so
did
sad.
develop a late age shellfish allergy, which I found out I've eaten shrimp my whole life. Anyway, but you can get it as an adult and as a woman. PSA for any of you out there. So,
My
but not
mom got the same one.
really. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm not alone, but I can
No.
still eat dairy, so life is good. Okay. So two questions, and then we only have a few minutes. So,
Yes.
um, and so you can answer both or one depending on how you want to navigate our time. One is like, what do you wish you had known when you had started out in this field that you know now that you want to share with clients and or practitioners? And then the other one is, do you have a favorite way to teach about bone and menstrual health that helps people employ behavioral strategies that help them?
I think for the first one, what do I wish I had known? I wish I had known how important periods are for so many reasons, right? As I was a kiddo playing sports, I was told it was an indicator that you were really fit and that you could like you were really fit in your sport. And it's just like, oh, that's so opposite of what we really should be
Yes.
teaching our kids now. And I think as I was a new practitioner, it was just periods are important. End of story. But like,
Essentially important. Yes,
right.
essential.
So the why, I think, has come over time with me learning and educating. And it's just been this like build of information that I've learned of like, oh my gosh, it's so integral to every single piece of our bodies. So
Yeah.
I think I wish, I had learned a lot more and known a lot more. But then now, how do I get how do I teach it? How do I get people involved? Is
Wait, before you answer that, can I ask one more question? You had
yes.
mentioned that if somebody doesn't have their first period until after 16, that's a little
Yes.
dangerous? Can you say something about?
Yes. So the research does show that if an individual does not have their period by 16, they are at a higher risk of developing osteopenia and osteoporosis later in life. Essentially, we're missing 4, 5, 6 years of developmental like delay in our bone health.
Yeah.
So those are the key years where our bone is like rapidly developing. So if you don't get it until 16, 17, 18, we're missing a really large chunk of time. So if that is you, or if you know someone, that's time to kind of reach out to your doctor and say, hey, what's going on? Like, let's do some workup. Let's see what's going on.
And restore it with vitamin F if at all possible, because you'll be
Yes.
in such better shape the faster you get it back. Okay. And then
Yes.
your last thing
Yes.
about favorite ways to teach.
Enthusiasm.
Yes.
I just think it's so cool. I just love how it's all connected. I get so fired up to talk about periods and birth control and bone health and just I think I take the stigma away from like, oh, I don't want to talk about this or this is weird and uncomfy. And it's just we lay it all out there and we get to talk openly about all these things that are happening to our bodies and how cool it is.
Oh my gosh, I could not agree with you more. I mean, our skeletons are essential. They're like the literal bones of our body. We always talk about bones as like the structure and the foundation. Literally, our bones
Literally.
are the foundation of our health and wellness, and our menstrual cycle is such an important, essentially important, as you have pointed out so beautifully, part of our health and longevity and wellness. Thank you so much for your time today. This actually really was so helpful to teach me. I'm like, okay, ghrelin is the growling, leptin is the wholeness,
Yeah.
and
Growling, growling, growl.
growling, growling, growling. And we will have you back anytime that you'll come. Thank you so much.
You got it. Thank you so much for having me. This was great.
Okay, I think you're in charge of turning off the recording. So